Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on Little Slar YouTube channel. So today in this video we're going to answer a question that is asked by a subscriber because in his recent interview, so here you can see that he gave an interview for performance testing role where an interviewer asked him that if we don't have any monitoring tool in our project, so how will we identify the reason for any particular transaction that's having high response time? So in fact, he has answered through various resources, which through his experience that he told them that he will use the listeners, he told them that he'll use the reports to analyze the response times, throughput, and error rates, but still the interviewer is not satisfied with his answer. So in this video, we will see what are the or what is the right answer or what is the suitable answer for this question and how can we impress the interviewer and how can we answer this question very well with our knowledge. Okay, so with no further delay, let's go to the video. So as I've told you, in this video we're going to see about how to identify the reason for high response time without a monitoring tool in our project, because in most of the scenarios the project the team might not have the monitoring tool installed, or they do not have the provision, or they do not have the budget to get a monitoring tool. So in those scenarios, what are the options? Because we need to understand the response times, right? The increase in the response time or the reason for high response times. So in those scenarios we have to identify it. So the first thing is the logging and instrumentation. So we have to ensure that we do have sufficient logging and instrumentation are in place within the application code. So we have to set up the logging and instrumentation in the code. So this allows us to trace the flow of transactions, and also it helps us to identify the areas where the response times might be increasing. So the point here is we do have to set up sufficient logging and instrumentation. So the second thing is we have to set up, or we have to have log, or we have to log the timestamps at critical points in our application code which are related to the transactions in the question. So for example, if they have a particular transaction that has high response time, so we have to log the timestamps during the critical points in the application code. So that's the first point. So that's the first thing. So the first thing is very critical, which is we have to set up the logging and instrumentation. And the second point is the code and profiling. So the code profiling. So we have to utilize the code profiling tools to analyze the application's performance, because these code profiling tools can help us to identify which methods or functions are taking the most time to execute, because these code profiling tools are closely related to the monitoring tools, although we do not have these proficiency to set up the monitoring tools. But these code profiling tools, right, in fact there are like lots and lots of open source monitoring tools, and also they do depend on what language do you use, because the monitoring tools like the API, the application, the app dynamics or the Dynatrace or the any other high market share monitoring tool, they work with every code. But these code profiling tools, they work with a particular language. For example, like you'll have a set of tools for Python, you'll have a set of tools for Java. In fact, the Microsoft Visual Studio has its own profiling tool. So you can use the code profiling tools based on the language. So this actually gives you a flexibility or independence to use in your project. And the second thing is you have to focus on the profiling sections of code which are related to specific transactions which exhibit high response time. So the second point, and the most again the critical point, is the code profiling. So you have to start using the profiler. So you have to answer your interviewer that you will use the profiling tool. So before you answer that, you make sure that you try some code profiling tools. In fact, I will actually take you through some of the open source profiling tools in our next videos. But before that, I will ask you to just go through some profiling tools, code profiling tools, and look into it, like how does it work, because that will actually give you more advantage and courage in answering the questions and confidence in answering the questions. So the next part is the database query analysis, which is a very common thing which we all can do. So we have to examine the database queries which are associated with the transaction, and any inefficient database queries can significantly contribute to high response time. So we have to monitor this, and in fact we do not need a monitoring tool for doing this. In fact, just an AWR report will help us to understand the transactions with high response times. And then by using the database profiling tools, again, like I told you, like the code profiling tools, we have a lot of other database profiling tools, or we have even query analyzers to identify and optimize the slow performing queries. And then the network analysis, so that's another critical part. So the first thing is we saw about the code, and then we discussed about the database queries, and now we move to the network analysis. So you have to remember all these when you answer your interviewer. So you have to, so this answering this way will make your interviewer understand that you do have a depth knowledge in the performance testing and also in performance engineering, where you can efficiently handle the bottlenecks. So now the part is network analysis. So we have to analyze the network traffic between different components of our application. So any slow or congested network connections can or will impact the response times. And then these network monitoring tools or packet analyzers can help identify any network related issues. And now moving on to the next part. So here this might be redundant, but still I will answer you how to do this. So the next point is the resource utilization, where we have to monitor the resource utilization of servers such as CPU, memory and disk usage. And high resource usage can lead to performance degradation. So here you might have a question that we do not have any monitoring tool, so how can we monitor the CPU or memory or disk usage? We have tools which is the system monitoring tools or command line utilities, which provides insights into the resource consumption. So we have to again look for any system monitoring tools. In fact, if we get any open source monitoring tools, we are good to use that. And in fact, if we have any command line utilities which is already prepared, or if you are good to prepare it, you can prepare it. And in fact, I will just personally go through and will try to come up with some command line utilities where we can monitor the CPU and memory of the system. And then coming on to the concurrency and threading issues. This is again something related to the code level, so which is like the thread parts. So we have to check for any concurrency or threading issues in the application code, and also we have to check for any deadlocks or contention for resources which can lead to delays. And also we have to review the application's thread model and ensure it is optimized for performance. So we have to analyze all these parts step by step. So we do not want to analyze everything at the same time, but when you start to analyze these part one by one, you can come up with lots of knowledge and lots of insights into how does the transactions work, or how does the applications work. Now moving on to the seventh part, which is the user simulation with logging. So we have to simulate user actions manually or with simple script and analyze the corresponding logs. So again, coming back to the first point, which is analyzing the logs. So how we're going to do it is we're going to simulate the user actions manually or with the simple scripts. And then we have to identify any patterns or steps where the response time seems to increase unexpectedly. So we have to identify those patterns, and that's again very important, because for any increase in response times which are like unexpected, we have to identify the patterns and the steps. And the next part is the client side analysis. So if applicable, we have to analyze the client side performance using the browser developer tools or client side profiling tools. In fact, I have a lots of videos on how to do this, like to analyze the throughput, the time to first byte, and any other client side performance related metrics. So in fact, I can even share you the link of those videos. So they're like very helpful, and in fact they eliminate you to use the need of any monitoring tools, because they help you to identify any rendering issues for any excessive client-side processing or any slow network request. So again, client-side analysis is another critical part. And finally, this is very important part, which is collaboration with the developers. So we have to collaborate closely. The performance engineers have to collaborate closely with the developers to understand the application architecture and for any potential bottlenecks. And also we have to work together to review the code or to identify the performance improvement opportunities and implement any necessary changes. So overall, in summary, I would say while a dedicated monitoring tool provide comprehensive insights, but a combination of these manual techniques, the logging and collaboration with development teams will still help identify and address performance issues in the absence of such tools. And in fact, even the interviewer is not convinced with these techniques, you can add some more points, which I will come up now. So what are those additional points or what are those additional resources which I want you to showcase to your interviewer? Is the first part is the custom metrics and logging. So what is this custom metrics and logging? So as a performance tester or performance engineer, you have to implement custom metrics within the application code to capture specific performance related for the targeted transaction. So how can we do it is you have to enhance the logging to include detailed information about the processing steps, timing, and any conditional statements that could affect the performance. So this, in fact, this is the point we have discussed in the previous part, but since I have told you this is like a kind of an additional or an extended part, so you can add those points, which is you have to include detailed information about the processing steps, their timings, and any conditional statements that could affect the performance. The next part is the error analysis. So we have to investigate for error logs and any error handling mechanisms because the high response times may be correlated with an increase in error rates, and we have to prioritize fixing any errors that contribute to delays in the transaction. And then when it comes to the load balancer analysis, so if our application employs load balancing, so we all know what is a load balancing. So if our application has a load balancing part, and we have to assess how evenly the load is distributed among servers, and an imbalanced distribution can lead to performance issues. So we have to check for load balancers logs or metrics to identify patterns associated with high response time. So again, the load balancer part which was not discussed earlier, so since it was an additional and extended part, so we do have to check the load balancer logs for identifying any patterns associated with high response times. And then moving on to the next part, which is the heap and garbage collection analysis. So we are this heap and garbage collection analysis plays a vital part in identifying the reasons for high performance, high response times. So for applications which are written in languages like Java, we can examine the heap memory usage and garbage collection patterns, and also using this heap and garbage collection analysis we can optimize the garbage collection settings to minimize its impact on response times. And then moving on to the code review for performance best practices. So we have to conduct a thorough code review which are specifically focusing on performance best practices. So what is doing a thorough or a code review? So we have to look for potential areas of improvement such as redundant code or inefficient algorithms or resource leaks. And I would advise the performance testers that most of the people choose performance testing with the idea that we do not have to make any coding, but it's no more like that. Every performance tester and engineer should have a lot of knowledge on coding, and in fact it's not a big deal. People who has a background in mechanical engineering or triple engineering can do a coding, and why can't the same people with the same background or people with a computer science background could not do a coding? So it's very simple. So please have a confidence in you. It's just a matter of code. You can just read it and you can very well understand it. It might take some time for you in the beginning, but going forward it will be like very easy peasy work for you. So don't worry about that. So start learning the coding because it will help you to develop in your career and also in the performance testing area. And the next part is the scenario based testing. So you have to design and execute specific test scenarios which isolates the targeted transactions, because they help you to reproduce and analyze the performance issues more effectively. And also by varying the input parameters or user interactions to identify conditions which are leading to high response times. And then moving on to the next part, which is stress testing. So if possible, conduct a stress testing to evaluate how the application performs under extreme conditions, because this can uncover scalability issues that may contribute to elevated response times. And then moving on to the next part, which is the peer collaboration. So you have to discuss the issue with the team members. In fact, we have discussed previously with the developers. So this is again like a kind of a peer collaboration. So where they can give you a lot of insights into the application's performance characteristics, or even they can leverage collective knowledge and will help, and their experience can help you to identify potential causes and solutions. This is again a best part, because talking to people and understanding their knowledge will open, like, unlock lots of doors and will unlock lots of messages to you. And then the next part is the temporary profiling tools. So in the absence of a dedicated memory tool, or you do not have an option to use a dedicated monitoring tool, you can consider temporarily implementing lightweight profiling tools that can provide real-time insights into the application's performance, which I have told you already. So we will see about some of the lightweight or open source profiling tools in our upcoming videos. And then the next part is the historical performance data. So we have to review the historical performance data, and if it is available, to identify patterns or trends in response times, because they can help in understanding whether the issue is intermittent or persistent. And then when it comes to the documentation and knowledge sharing, so that's the last part. So you have to ensure that performance related documentation is up to date and shared among team members, because this includes the architectural diagrams, data flow diagrams, and any relevant performance tuning guidelines. So by expanding on these points, you can demonstrate a more thorough approach to identifying and approaching performance issues in the absence of a monitoring tool, like we discussed earlier. So additionally, we have to emphasize our commitment to continuous improvement and collaboration with the development team to implement effective solutions. So these are some of the points which you can discuss during your interview. You can just tell to your interviewer that this is how you can confidently face this scenario or this challenge. So with that, I complete my video on this particular topic, and I wish you all the very best for those who are taking an interview and who are just watching this video for their interview. I wish you all the very best, and until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Shanmugam and Little's Law.